I'm Eric, 38, middle manager at a logistics firm in Savannah, Georgia. I thought I had the American dream, a good job, a nice home, a beautiful wife. But over dinner one night, Natalie, once my best friend, called me an embarrassment over spilled salt. And that's when I knew something deeper was wrong. It was just salt, a small spill on the wooden table, barely a few grains near my hand. But Natalie reacted like I'd shattered a wine glass in a church. She didn't yell. That might have been easier. She just stared at the salt with contempt like it symbolized everything wrong with me. Then, without a word, she stood up, pushed her chair back with a screech, and walked out barefoot. No eye contact, no final jab, just a wall of silence. At that moment, I knew this wasn't about salt, hadn't been for a long time. I'm Eric, 38, logistics manager for a furniture company in Savannah, Georgia. I live in a neighborhood where people mow their lawns on Saturdays and wave from their porches but don't ask questions. For a long time, I thought I had it made. A good job, a paid-off Honda, a house with a porch swing, and a wife I loved. Natalie and I had been married for 6 years, and for most of them, I believed we were solid. I thought we were partners, friends even. We used to laugh in the kitchen over burnt cookies and late-night pancakes. We used to talk about books, shows, stupid things that made us feel young again. Somewhere along the way, all of that faded. It didn't disappear in one big blowout. It eroded, quietly, consistently, like water against stone. And I missed it. I missed her. I knew we weren't in a good place, but it still caught me off guard. The way she looked at me that night. Not like a partner, like a stranger she was forced to share a table with. I sat alone for a while after she left, just staring at the salt, wondering how many tiny moments like that had passed between us, how many small signs I'd ignored because they were too uncomfortable to confront. I tried to tell myself that people go through rough patches, that maybe we were just tired, overworked, caught up in the grind, but deep down I knew better. This wasn't stress, this wasn't a phase. Something had cracked between us, and the silence had been growing wider ever since. The next morning I got a haircut. Rick's barbershop hasn't changed in 20 years. Rick's been cutting my hair since before I proposed to Natalie. He's the kind of guy who doesn't pry, but somehow always knows what to say without saying much. That day he looked at me through the mirror and asked, "Rough week?" I laughed. "You could say that." We talked while he trimmed. Well, mostly I talked. I told him about the salt incident, how she called me an embarrassment. He didn't react much, just nodded. "You sure it was just about the salt?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "It's never about the thing. It's everything else." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a one-off. It was a symptom, a warning flare I had ignored until it exploded in my face. I started thinking about the other signs. The missing slippers, her empty side of the closet, the coffee mug she stopped using. A slow, quiet disappearance that I had pretended not to notice. That night after she went to bed, I stayed up and planned a surprise. Something simple. 2 tickets to the Fox Theater in Atlanta. She used to love that place. I even bought a necklace, a silver chain with a small blue stone that reminded me of the first earrings I ever gave her. I wrapped it all in a box and hid it in the kitchen drawer where she keeps the coffee filters. I didn't write a note. This wasn't a grand gesture or an apology. It was a signal, a reminder that I hadn't given up on us. And maybe that's what makes this story so strange. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't trying to get revenge or punish her for shutting me out. I just wanted to reconnect, to see if there was anything left to fight for. But here's what I've learned since then. The scariest part of losing someone you love isn't the screaming or even the silence. It's realizing they're slipping away while still sitting right beside you, and you don't know how to hold on without crushing them. I wasn't ready to give up, but I also knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. That's how it began. With spilled salt, a cracked smile, and the sinking feeling that the woman I married was vanishing right in front of me. And I didn't know it yet, but the moment I chose to fight for her was also the moment I began to lose myself. 3 days passed before she found the gift. I noticed it opened on the counter, tickets gone, necklace missing. She didn't say a word about it, but that night, just before I turned off my lamp, She leaned over in the dark and kissed my cheek. Not a romantic kiss, not a makeup kiss. Just something, a flicker. And in that flicker, I felt hope. The next morning, I booked a trip to Asheville, a cabin near the Blue Ridge Parkway, just the two of us. I didn't ask her if she wanted to go. I just printed the confirmation and left it on her nightstand with a clipped sprig of rosemary from the garden. It was simple, thoughtful, familiar, like the old us. She didn't say anything. But that weekend, she packed a suitcase. We drove in near silence. Her eyes barely left the window. She didn't hold my hand, didn't smile, didn't talk unless I asked her something directly. But she packed, she came, and I took that as a win. The cabin was small, surrounded by trees, quiet in a way the city never is. That first night, we had dinner by the fireplace. She didn't check her phone once. I thought maybe we were turning a corner. She even wore the necklace. She sat on the couch, curled up with a magazine, wine in hand. For a second, she looked like the woman I used to know. I told her I missed the sweater she had on. She said it was old, then added, "Still suits me." Almost smiled. Almost. It felt like a thaw. But thawing isn't the same as healing, and the next day made that painfully clear. I planned a massage for us, a nice spa outside of town. It smelled like lavender. The staff was warm. We lay side by side in silence, music humming low. Afterwards, she looked blank. No glow, no peace, just the same flatness. Back at the cabin, I made her favorite, rosemary lemon chicken. She complimented the seasoning, but barely touched her plate. After dinner, she disappeared into the bathroom for nearly an hour. When she came out, she didn't say goodnight, just slid into bed and turned away. I stared at the ceiling, listening, thinking, wondering. The next morning, we sat on the porch, wrapped in fleece, drinking coffee. Fog clung to the trees like a curtain. Her phone was finally on the table. I waited. "Are you happy?" I asked. She didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. "I'm just tired." 2 words, but the way she said them, that wasn't the kind of tired a nap could fix. I didn't push. I should have. I know that now. But in the moment I froze, because something about her answer didn't feel like indifference. It felt like surrender. We drove home the next day. Neither of us said much. She went to bed early. I sat in the dark on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, heart heavy in my chest. For the first time since that night with the salt, I felt completely alone in my own house. 2 days later, her sister Maya called. Maya's not one for sugarcoating, never was. She's younger than Natalie by a few years, louder, sharper, but full of heart. She asked how the trip was. I told her the truth. It was beautiful, but I was the only one there. Maya paused. Then she said something that changed everything. She's not herself, hasn't been for a long time. What do you mean? She's depressed, Eric. Has been for at least a year. She won't talk about it. She won't get help. I've tried everything. I leaned forward, elbows on knees. She told me she was just tired. She says that a lot, but it's more than that. She's numb, like someone turned down the volume on her life. It made sense. Everything suddenly did. The detachment, the silence, the way she stopped laughing at my dumb jokes or looking me in the eye. I thought she was angry, that maybe she didn't love me anymore. But this wasn't rejection. It was something darker. "She's not pulling away from you," Maya said. "She's pulling away from everything. You just happen to be the closest one in reach." That hurt, but it also gave me clarity. For months, I thought I'd done something wrong, that I'd failed her somehow. But this wasn't about failure. It was about a woman sinking so quietly no one saw the waves. That night, I lay awake beside Natalie, watching her sleep, or pretend to. I couldn't tell anymore. But I didn't feel angry. I felt empty. Not the dramatic kind, just hollow, like the final box had been moved out of a home that used to be ours. And for the first time, I didn't think, "How do I fix this?" I thought, "Can this even be fixed?" The next morning, I brewed 2 mugs of coffee, set hers on the table like I always did. But instead of just walking away, I left something next to it, a sealed envelope. Inside were divorce papers. Clean, simple, no threats, no anger, just a line in the sand. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want to explain. I wanted the silence to speak for itself. When I came home that evening, she was sitting at the table. The envelope was still sealed. Her mug sat untouched. But her eyes were red. She didn't look angry. She looked wrecked. "Why?" she asked. I sat across from her. Calm. "Because I'm not a ghost, Natalie, and I'm tired of living like one." She looked down, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to shut you out. You called me an embarrassment. You stopped talking to me. You stopped seeing me. I didn't hate you," she whispered. "I hated myself. I didn't know how to say it. If I admitted it out loud, it would become real. And I didn't want it to be." She broke down right there. No drama, just years of pressure collapsing at once. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face. She couldn't stop, and I didn't try to interrupt. When she finally spoke again, it was a whisper. "I thought you'd stay, no matter what. Even if I disappeared, I thought you'd keep loving me through it." I stared at her for a long time. And maybe the cruelest part? I had. I'd stayed long past the point most people would. I'd given everything I had, even when there was nothing coming back. "I did stay," I said. "But love isn't about letting yourself vanish just to prove you're loyal." She reached for my hand across the table, fingers trembling. "I'll do anything," she said. "Therapy, help, whatever it takes. I don't want this to be the end." I didn't pull away, but I didn't speak either, because something inside me had shifted. I had been drowning too, and I had ignored it because I thought rescuing her was more important. But I finally understood. I couldn't save her if it meant losing myself. The next morning, I gave her the name of a therapist. First session was scheduled, paid for. She nodded, quiet, shaky, but she didn't resist. That was new. Then I picked up the divorce papers from the table and slid them back to her. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's not anger. It's not about punishing you. I just can't keep pretending we're okay while everything inside me feels broken." She nodded again. No arguments, no pleading, just quiet understanding. The kind that only comes when both people finally admit what they've known for a long time. That night, I packed a small bag, essentials only. The rest could wait. She sat on the edge of the bed watching me. When I zipped the duffel closed, she asked, "Do you think there's a version of us that could have made it?" I paused. "Yeah, I do, but we didn't fight for it in time." She walked over, hands shaking slightly as they found mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for making you disappear." "I know," I said, "and I hope you find your way back." Then she kissed me, on the cheek, just like that night after she found the tickets. But this time, there was no question. This time, it was goodbye. I walked out without looking back. I stayed in a motel on the outskirts of town for the first week. It was cheap, quiet, forgettable. I needed space, and not just physically. I needed to remember what it felt like to be alone without feeling responsible for someone else's silence. Natalie didn't call, didn't text, but I didn't expect her to. I think we both knew that the next move wasn't about words. It was about action. A few days later, I got a message from Maya. Short, she went to the appointment. I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't know how to feel. Relieved? Vindicated? Sad? I was all of it, I guess. But mostly I felt tired. Not the kind she had claimed, a different kind. The kind that comes after carrying someone else's pain for too long. That weekend, I went back to the house to pick up the rest of my things. Natalie wasn't home. I moved through the rooms like a guest. Everything was where it used to be, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I grabbed clothes, a few books, and the picture frame from our trip to Maine. One of the last times we looked genuinely happy. On my way out, I noticed something that stopped me cold. On the refrigerator, she had pinned a copy of the therapy schedule. Not hidden, not folded, just there. Visible. It meant something. Not everything, but something. I left without leaving a note. The next few weeks passed quietly. I settled into a small rental near the river. I focused on work, started running again, saw friends I hadn't made time for in years. I slept better, but not always. Sometimes I woke up expecting to hear her beside me. Sometimes I didn't know whether I missed her or just the version of us that felt safe. One evening, I ran into Rick at the barber shop. He didn't ask much, just nodded and said, "Heard you moved out." I nodded back. He paused, then added, "Some storms pass, some leave a new coastline." It wasn't poetic, it was just true. A few days later, Natalie called. Her voice was soft but steady. She thanked me for setting up the therapy and said she'd been going every week. "It's hard," she admitted, "but I'm starting to see things more clearly." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. Then she asked, "Do you think there's any version of this where we try again?" It caught me off guard, not because I hadn't imagined the question, but because I didn't know my answer anymore. "I think," I said slowly, "we both need to get better on our own before we even think about being anything together." There was a pause. Not tense, just quiet. "I get that," she said. "I really do." That was it. No promises, no tears, just honesty. A week later, I got a card in the mail, handwritten, short. "Thank you for not giving up on me completely, even when I didn't deserve it. I'm working on being someone who does." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology wrapped in guilt. It was something real. I pinned it to my fridge. I wasn't sure if we'd ever find our way back to each other. Maybe we would. Maybe we wouldn't. But for the first time, that question didn't feel like the most important thing. What mattered more was that we had both stopped pretending. She had finally reached for help, and I had finally reached for myself. 3 months after I moved out, Natalie and I met for coffee. She picked the place, small, quiet, somewhere in between our two neighborhoods. She looked different, not in the way someone changes their style, but in how she carried herself. She seemed more present, grounded. We talked. Not about the past, not about regrets, about normal things. How work was going, what shows we'd been watching, how Maya had adopted another cat. It was the kind of conversation we hadn't had in years. Easy, undemanding. After an hour, she said, "I'm still in therapy, every week." I nodded. "That's good." "I used to think asking for help made me weak," she added. "Now I know that pretending you don't need it is what really breaks you." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "I used to think love meant staying no matter what, but sometimes it means walking away before you both disappear." She didn't argue, she just said, "Yeah, it does." We parted without any grand declarations. No dramatic hugs, no promises, but there was a sense of peace in it, like we'd both stepped off a battlefield and realized we could stop fighting. Not just each other, but the lies we'd been telling ourselves. In the weeks that followed, we didn't see each other much. An occasional text, a shared laugh about something random. But we stayed in touch. Not out of obligation, but because it felt honest, clean, uncomplicated. I started going to therapy too. Not because I was broken, but because I realized I'd ignored my own needs for too long. I talked about my patterns, about how I'd learned to minimize myself for the sake of someone else's comfort, about how easy it is to confuse patience with self-neglect. The more I talked, the more I understood something important. Natalie's depression wasn't my fault, but staying silent about how it affected me, that part was on me. I had chosen to carry both of us, and in doing so, I disappeared. 6 months after we split, I saw her again. This time, she smiled as soon as she saw me. It was the real kind, the one that starts without trying. We didn't talk about getting back together. We didn't need to. The version of us that existed now was something else entirely. Two people who had finally learned how to stand alone before trying to stand together. That night, I walked back to my apartment, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Whole, not healed. Healing, not victorious. Just clear. People always talk about love as sacrifice, but real love, the lasting kind, doesn't ask you to lose yourself. It asks you to know yourself so well that you can share your life without demanding someone else complete it. Natalie and I didn't have a fairy tale ending. There was no grand reunion, no last-minute confession in the rain, but we had something better. Accountability, honesty, and finally respect. She chose to get help. I chose to stop enabling silence. And together, even apart, we chose growth. So if you've ever stayed too long hoping someone will change, or left too soon afraid they never would, know this. It's not weak to walk away when you're drowning. It's not selfish to say, this hurts me too. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go find themselves. And sometimes in doing that, you finally find yourself too.